Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is cook up my mushrooms over a medium-high heat, and I'm going to stir these until they get really brown. There's some butter in the bottom of that, and you can hear them making a little bit of noise, and they're going to cook. Okay, so I've just got my mushrooms cooking here on the burner here over medium-high heat, and in the middle of cooking this, I've decided I'm going to do this a different way today. So I'm just going to mix all my stuff together and have it not be separate with cream of mushroom soup. So I'm going to cook my onions along with my mushrooms. Now I probably should have put these in a little bit earlier, but you know, last minute decisions, things like this always happen all the time with me. So I'm going to put these in, and then I'm just going to let them cook until they get soft, and at the same time the mushrooms will continue to get a little bit brown. And then when the onions start to get soft, I'm going to add the garlic in about 2 or 3 minutes. Okay, it's been about 4 minutes, and those are getting nicely brown, and the onions are starting to be transparent. So now I'm going to put some garlic in here, and I'm going to make a little divot in the middle there, a little hole. I'm going to take my garlic, and as you see from earlier, I have both my dehydrated garlic and my regular. And I'm just going to stick it right in the middle, and in about 30 seconds, this is going to start to smell really good as it starts to cook, and then I'm going to mix it all together. I'm going to give it a couple more moments. You don't want to cook garlic for too long, it'll burn. And then I'm going to stick some ground beef in here. I have about half of a pound because I don't like to eat a whole bunch of ground beef all at once. And I'm going to just break this up and stick it in the pan. Just like that. I'm going to break it up with and I'm going to cook it again for about another 5 to 6 minutes until it gets nice and brown. Okay, so while my hamburger is cooking, I am going to turn on the oven. Now the first thing you always do when you turn on the oven is open the door to look inside to see if there's anything in there. Because if somebody accidentally forgot and left a bowl or something in there, you'll end up with a burnt bowl or perhaps even a melted one. It's happened to me before. So I'm going to turn the oven on to 350 degrees, and I'm going to move the rack to the middle. And I'm just going to close the door and let it warm up while I'm still finished cooking my hamburger. Okay, now that my hamburger is done cooking, there's no more pink left in it. And even if there is a little bit of pink left, it's still going to be put in the oven, so it's okay if it's not completely cooked. But you want it as cooked as much as possible. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take all this and put it into this bowl, which has holes in the bottom of it, which means that all of the grease and oils and everything that I've used on here are going to go right straight through and is going to drain out through the bottom. Then that way I can get as much oil and grease off of that hamburger as possible. So here, I'll show you. So here, you can see that's dripping down through the bottom. And I'm going to use the grease down at the bottom for my little bechamel sauce that's going to go and be used for the sauce. So what I'm going to do is take that, well, I have to let it drain for a minute. Okay, so it's drained a couple minutes, and you can see there's a lot of juices and good flavorings down at the bottom here, but there's a lot of it that still has some moisture in it. So I'm going to put it in here and cook it down a little bit so it's not completely and totally wet when I put the flour in it here. And get that hot, see that some of the moisture is coming off of it. That's quite a bit, so I'll give it just a minute and let it cook. In the meanwhile, I have about 2 tablespoons of flour here that I'm going to put in with that and turn it into startings of a bechamel sauce. And I'm going to get rid of most of that except for just about a tablespoon. You see there's about a tablespoon left in there, so that'll be some good flavorings. Then I'm just going to put this flour right in there. I'm going to get a spoon, or not a spoon, a fork, and mix it around. And what's going to happen is the flour is going to soak up all of that flavor in here. And I'm going to cook it a little bit here to get rid of the flour taste, the raw flour taste. And what's going to happen is after it cooks for a couple minutes, I'm going to put some half and half in here and turn this into a nice little gravy sauce here. So I'm going to let this sit for a minute and get my cream and half out. Okay, so as my flour mixture here is browning and getting cooked a little bit, what I'm going to do is take a cup full of my half and half here, like this, and I'm going to stick this in the microwave for about 40 seconds so it'll heat up, because I don't like to put the cold half and half in with the hot flour. Okay, so now that's ready to put the half and half in. I'm going to turn the heat down to low, because what's going to happen is as soon as I put this in here, all of this flour is going to absorb the half and half really quickly. So I'm just going to pour this in here, and then I'm going to stir really quick. Now, if I had the heat on really high, that would just steam up a whole bunch and possibly hurt my hand. So I'm just going to continue to stir this. I've got a little fork here. You're going to probably have some lumps in the bottom of here, and you know, that's okay. I never really worry about my lumps too much. I just keep rolling and mixing here. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the heat back on, which I did, and I turn up to about medium-high again. And what I need to do is to bring this half and half up to a boil, because this will thicken as it gets hotter. Now in the meanwhile, I also have a cup here that used to have, that has some hot water in it with a bullion cube. Let's put that in here too. And keep mixing. And mixing. Until it comes up to a boil. Now when it gets up a little bit more, I'm going to put in, as it gets mixed up a little bit more. Now this one is a little bit more. You can see it's of half and half. And this one's cold. I'm not going to heat this one up because this is already tempered. So I'm going to bring this in just a little bit. I'm not going to put the whole thing in. I'm going to pay attention to what this is doing as it comes up to heat. And the thicker it gets, the more milk I'll put into it, depending. And it always depends on the weather and how much flour and so on and so forth. So this is a recipe that doesn't have to be exact. It's always, you know, make it how you like it. That's my thinking, or how your family likes it. So I'm just going to keep stirring this until this comes up to boil. Okay, you can see now this is coming up to a boil. It's getting a little bit thicker. And I'm just going to let it boil down a little bit. What's going to do, it's going to, the heat will help the flour, that brown, thicken this up. Also the fat content in the half and half is going to help to thicken that up a little bit too. So while I'm waiting, I have gone out and got me a big, huge glass pan. And this one is like the hugest one they have. I don't know how big that is, but it's huge. So, and I'm just going to put that over on the side. I've also gotten out my bag of potato rounds. I can't show those to you on the video because it has brand name on them. But the potato rounds are basically look like that. Okay, and I've got a whole bag of them, a whole small bag, and they are, see, 32 ounces. So again, I'm going to keep stirring this. Getting all, what happens is the bottom part starts to get thick. So what I want to do is stir that to get the bottom off the bottom of the fry pan and mixed into with the top layer. And then I get around the outside too. You can see how that's starting to get thick. Okay, or maybe not, but I can see that it's getting thick. Now in the meanwhile, what I've also done is put some salt and pepper in here. I don't put too much because I don't like to cook with too much salt and pepper. Everybody, again, has their own flavoring. So what I'm going to do is put salt and pepper on the table instead, so if they would like to add their own, they can. And this is, see how thick that's getting. That's starting to look really good. Now this is going to thicken up even more once I put this, the hamburger back in here with everything else. And I think I'm going to add a little bit more of the cream because that's starting to look a little too thick for me. And I don't want it to get to a point where it gets like pudding. I don't want it that thick. Just want it just a little bit thick, soupy, like the cream of mushroom soup that you get out of the can. And again, I'll put a little bit more in there. Put the rest of that in. So that was almost 2 full cups of half and half. Now you can use heavy cream. You can use milk. You can also use water. Any of that works best for you. Then go ahead and use something else. Remember that when you're doing recipes, especially, you know, when you're just throwing things together like making casseroles, feel free to adjust those any way you like. See how that works. Okay, again, I'm going to wait till that heats up and boils, and I'll be back. Okay, so last time I brought that back up to a boil. I'm going to take my hamburger mixture now and stick it back in. Now this is going to thin it down some more, and you see that there's some holes on this, so all the excess fat has drained out of that, and I don't know if I can tip it sideways or not, but you can see how much of the fat got left in there from that pan, and that was just while I was waiting. So I'm going to get rid of that. Back in the old days, my grandmother would save all that and stick it in the back portion of the stove in a coffee can, and then she would just make gravy from the fat that she left on the back of the stove. Now, nowadays that's not as healthy as we would recommend, so I don't recommend doing that. Just kind of get rid of it. But what I'm going to do actually is put it in the freezer, freeze it up, and then I'll throw it in my garbage can. Don't put it down the drain unless you want your pipes to clog. Okay, I promise that will happen. All right, so I'm going to let this boil one more time. And then when it does, I'm going to stick it in the pan and then assemble everything and get it in the oven. All right, now this has come up to boil one last time. I'm going to turn it off the heat, mix it up, and then I'm going to assemble everything into my glass container. This here. All right. So all that is going to go right in the bottom. And I'm going to scrape out all the lovely goodness in the bottom there. And you can see how that's kind of thickened up. Looks kind of really nice. Okay, and I guarantee this homemade cream mushroom sauce here in bechamel tastes way better than the stuff in the can. Didn't take that much longer. Okay. So if you're not in a big old hurry, then make your own. Okay, tastes much better. Okay, so put that there. And next thing I'm going to do is put in all of my tater tots. I'm going to do this off camera. Okay, so I dumped all my tater tots in there, and I'm just going to spread those around evenly on top. Just like that. They're not, you see this not in a nice even layer, but it's good enough. The casserole's really not going to care too much. I'm going to push them down, just make sure they don't go too far. Then I'm going to take the cheese that I grated a little bit earlier, and I've got 8 ounces of sharp cheddar cheese. And I'm just going to sprinkle those over the top. Now, we used to call this poor people food, and I don't know if it's really too much for poor people food because it's not that cheap to make this. Okay, for me, this will feed about a family of, well, I'm going to say 4, my family of 4. But in a normal family that doesn't have growing boys and extra hungry husband, this will only feed about 4 at my place. Okay, but if you have small children and just yourself and perhaps maybe one other person, this should be plenty to eat for dinner. Now, some people will put things like corn in there. I personally don't like corn, but you can do that. I wouldn't suggest putting peas in there. What I'm going to do instead, I'm going to make up some broccoli separate, and then I'm going to serve that up with some broccoli. Now, one more thing I have to do is cover this. So I've gotten a piece of aluminum foil, and I'm just going to put this right over the top. I'm going to cover this. What's going to happen is by covering it, it's going to hold all the steam in there, and it's going to heat up those tater tots really fast, and it's going to hold all the heat in. And this will go in the oven on 350 in the middle rack for about a half an hour. Now what's going to happen is I'll look on the side here because this is glass. I'll look on the side and see if it's boiling down here. If it's boiling down here, I know the top and the potatoes will be done. Also, I'll take a peek in and see if that cheese is melted. Okay, so in the oven it goes. Okay, so I just took it out of the oven, and you see here that all of the cheese is melted, and this is going to make a fabulous dinner.